This video and all other videos on this channel are for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all. Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel. And I woke up late today, so we're a little bit behind the schedule, but today I found this clip from Michael Saylor and I want to play you that. And then I want to put up a longer term Bitcoin chart and show you a couple of things, because everything that is being spoken about at the moment, things like strategic reserves, the US buying Bitcoin, sovereign wealth funds, Saylor permanent bid, if there's any merit to the idea that this stuff is going to be conducive to higher Bitcoin prices, then we really, as far as I can tell, should be about to go practically straight up to numbers that very few people currently believe are attainable. So I'm going to play you this Michael Saylor clip, and then I'm going to pull up a macro chart of Bitcoin and show you exactly what I'm talking about. At the end, as always, we'll take a look at some cycles for multiple asset classes, live trades, that kind of thing.
You should have the most prominent chair, the one with the armchair with the arms on it, because your company owns more Bitcoin than any other company. What, about 500,000 tokens?
Yeah, about 2.4% of the worldwide supply, okay. 500,000.
Let's just get your view, because everybody's dying to know about the summit and what they think is going to be announced. How do you think this crypto reserve will be financed?
Well, I think that there's a 6-month process that's been laid out by the executive order, and I think the president was fairly deliberate in that. There are 12 members on the Presidential Working Committee. There'll be involvement from the industry, there'll be involvement from the Senate and from the House, and it's above my pay grade to decide how it gets determined, but the Lummis bill has laid out the idea of acquiring Bitcoin strategically over 4 years, just consistently day by day, in order to reach a million Bitcoin target.
Okay, the government has 200,000 Bitcoin, as I understand it. We equal about 17 billion at today's prices. So to get up there, they would have to purchase Bitcoin, right? So as the government purchases these Bitcoin and other tokens, what is that going to do to the price? I mean, supply goes down, the price goes up?
Well, the most responsible thing would be to go slow and steady and deliberate with clear telegraphing and transparency, so that the real key about Bitcoin is for people to understand that it's digital property. It's a savings account that empowers every single American to save their wealth and preserve it over time. And so what the government can do is to give clarity to the asset class and confidence to every American citizen, so they know they have an alternative to gambling and the stock market.
Okay, so this idea that they can potentially acquire up to 1 million Bitcoin. They only hold around 200k at the moment, which would mean, of course, over the next 4 years, they'd need to average about 200,000 Bitcoin purchased per year. And Saylor is suggesting, let's do that slowly, over time, consistently, transparently. Hard to suggest that the US greenlighting the purchase of Bitcoin and announcing a transparent strategy to acquire 200,000 Bitcoin a year for the next 4 years is not bullish, right? That sounds extremely bullish. I think we can all agree on that. Not just because it's a bid underneath Bitcoin, but moreover because it green lights it to the rest of the world, doesn't it? It's hard to say, well, this is just for idiots and drug dealers and whatever else, when the US is in the middle of adding this to its strategic reserve and going to want to hold 1 million Bitcoin for the long term. Of course, there's also a potential game theory element here. Perhaps if the US announced this, then China is also going to want 1 million Bitcoin. Perhaps the UK, Europe, a bunch of other places, right? And then we get this whole kind of game theory type deal playing out. All of this sounds extremely bullish, okay? But as a cycle trader, I am, of course, hyper-focused on the cycles. And a lot of people that don't understand cycles or don't incorporate them into their strategy and their approach to investing and to trading, you will hear them say things like, this is the last cycle, the 4-year cycle will change, or there won't be any more 4-year cycles, or blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, there will. Okay, there absolutely will. And until such time as the market shows me something else, then I cannot possibly deviate away from this idea. I've never once seen it where cycles just cease to exist anymore. And so it seems like, based on a most probable outcome, we should continue to assume that the cycles will be present. And given that is true, we know mid to late 2026, there's going to be a major 4-year cycle low for Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is kind of a unique beast because it has been surprisingly, unusually consistent with its cycles. 37 months of bull market, 13 months of bear market. 35 months of bull market, 12 months of bear market. 35 months of bull market, 12 months of bear market. 35 to 36 months here would give us a top between October and November of this year. And then we should again expect somewhere akin to a 12-month bear market decline into that major 4-year cycle low in November of 2026. So I think everyone's aware of this 4-year cycle, 3 years up essentially, 1 year down, 3 years up, 1 year down. But here's the thing, when we zoom in on this current 4-year cycle, we are currently on month 28, which tells us the most amount of time that we can reasonably expect is another 8 months of bull market. And that is assuming that absolutely nothing is different. We're going to top in around October or November of this year, just like we always do, and then we're going to have another 12-month bear market decline. Assuming all of that, best case scenario, there is 8 months of bull market left. And of course, worst case scenario, we've already seen the top a couple of months back, and now what we're going to do for the first time is end up with a more mid-translated cycle top, followed by an extended bear market decline that probably lasts significantly more than 12 months. But as it stands at the moment, each weekly cycle low has yielded a double, as you know if you've been following the channel. Each weekly cycle low has been significantly higher. We went from 15 to about 25k to about 49k, and if this weekly cycle low is going to hold, then right around 78k for this weekly cycle low should tell us to expect a nice upside doubling here to put us somewhere in the neighborhood of 150, 160k. But here's where I can't quite reconcile what I'm seeing at the moment. Yes, under the hood, we know there's all of this bullish narrative going around. We know that apparently on as early as tomorrow, Friday, there's going to be a Trump summit and he's going to be talking about strategic reserve potentially, or he's going to rug pull everyone. No one knows yet, really. Okay, but this is what I mean by we're at this crazy inflection point. On Friday, we're either going to get completely rugged, and again, that was the top, and there's really not much more time to see a bull market here, or they are going to announce buying 200k Bitcoin a year for the next 4 years, and this is going to put some huge upside push in the market. But again, from a 4-year cycle perspective, we don't actually have much time here, okay? 8 months max, as I said. From this weekly cycle, the prior one, okay, to the top, something like this. Again, if that's going to unfold, then as you can see here, we're very, very close to the end of this cycle relative to the 4-year cycle low in its entirety. We are getting closer and closer every day to seeing that latter part of the cycle come into existence, and when it does, again, it's time to start nailing down some gains. It's also true, if we take the prior weekly cycle push and extrapolate it to here, that things could be about to get really, really berserko. And again, this would fit from a narrative perspective. If the US government is really going to announce it's about to start buying Bitcoin and adding it to a strategic reserve, then I would expect something like this, if not something more bullish still. Cycles, especially Bitcoin, tend to have blow-off tops. They tend to go from steep to steeper to steepest into the top. Meaning, as we experience more and more weekly cycle pushes, they tend to get more and more ferocious to the upside. And we can very simply illustrate this by drawing a few trend lines, okay? Here's one, okay? The lead-in phase, as you can see, is right here, okay? Touch. But notice how the next phase gets steeper. From this weekly cycle to the next weekly cycle low is even steeper. And we just so happen to be in that timing window to see another weekly cycle low push, which means if it can get a little bit more steeper here, okay, then things might really, really, really start to get even more insane than people are aware of. And this, of course, would just be Bitcoin doing Bitcoin things. So far, this has been very orderly and in a straight line. There's no real parabolic blow off top. But in prior cycles, most people look at this prior cycle here, and just because we had this distribution type top, people say that this was really, really disappointing. But actually, this parabola was very, very violent, very, very quick. And all you had to do was know a little bit about cycles, a little bit about how to time entries better than your average market participant. And this was an incredibly profitable move. This cycle was something like 20x off the lows. Okay, from 4-year cycle low to the peak is 20x. I mean, that's not to be sneezed at. I think people were expecting 1000x. And of course, relative to 1000x, that was significantly under expectations. But 20x is nothing to be sneezed at, in my humble opinion. And again, notice what we got here, okay? We got this kind of like, you could even draw it here if you want to encompass the wick. We'll do the wick first, okay? Very, very delicate lead-in phase. Then we kind of got this, right? And then in the final bit, we saw near vertical, okay? 3 increasing angles of steepness. And if you don't like the wick, which to be honest, I don't really either, we could put it like this, okay? And then change this one to something like this. I think this one looks a lot better, actually. I can see by my eyeball in here. And then again, the third angle goes near vertical. So you can see lead in phase, okay, second steepening, and then the third angle blow off top. Crazy time. Berserko mode, as I've been saying of late. So again, that's just normal Bitcoin things, right? It starts off as a gradual uptrend, it gets a bit steeper, and then in the final phases, we go blow off toppy, straight vertical Berserko mode. And that was even in the last cycle where, again, people consider this to be extremely lackluster thanks to the distribution type top. Needless to say, in the 2017 cycle, we did a very similar thing, right? We had a leading phase here. Later in the cycle, after we crossed about the halfway point in the bull market, it started to steepen before it got to the final sort of third. In fact, let's measure the months. The final 7 or 8 months, right? Just so happens to be where we are today. We're right around here, this candle here, about 8 months away from the expected ultra right translated top. This is where we potentially are. And you can see that the following month was where we started to go again, Berserko Insano mode. So again, I'm not really fitting a bias to my narrative here or anything like that. I'm just simply making objective observations. Bitcoin tends to go parabolic, and parabolas work in a very, very structured and routine way. They start off with one angle, they steepen, and then they go near vertical. So then going back to the hard right edge, this is what makes me think it really is kind of now or never for Fireworks. Either all of this stuff is total bait, total BS, total narrative, and this is entirely used to generate everyone like us to be exit liquidity. I don't like that term, but whatever. So we're going to come in here and bid this thing up, and it's not actually going to work. It's not actually going to go up. The big boys are going to be selling into us. We're going to get some more distribution show up here and a rollover, and all of this stuff will be entirely bait, right? Just bait to trap people into stepping into the market, hoping it's going to go higher, and in fact it's not. What's going to happen here is we're going to potentially roll over, okay? Either that's true, or we have now just left behind that weekly cycle. We are looking at a maximum of 8 months of upside here. We've already completed 1 and 2 angles of increasing steepness and are now getting ready for that near vertical final push to the upside. So I guess the question is, okay, which group of people do you belong to? Are you a believer? Do you believe that potentially we could be staring down the barrel of one of the most violent upside rallies to the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars per coin territory and one of the most face-melting rallies we've ever seen? Or are you in the camp of people that believes there's no merit to any of this? There's absolutely no way Bitcoin's about to enter that third and final blow off top angle, and we should all really just pack it up, go home, take the chips off the table here, and I'll see you late 2026 to buy the 4-year cycle low. I maintain the first step is believing. I think we've given this thing enough space. We saw a 30-odd% correction top to bottom here. We found what I believe to be a viable weekly cycle low, and the only missing component here is to come ripping out of it, just like we did in the prior weekly cycles. I say innocent until proven guilty. There's no reason for me to doubt this thing until it shows me something like a failed cycle that I can say, okay, objectively speaking, it should not have failed here. It should be entering Berserko mode. So if it does start to roll over and lose trend lines, then yes, I think we can say it's broken down and all of this was indeed a big trap. But in prior cycles, 8 months out, which is right around where we are now, has previously led to extreme upside gains, and thus I think it is somewhat malpractice to be bearish here. I think believing in something is probably the right posture to have, at least until we see significant levels lost. And I'm not convinced there are many people out there that truly understand what a reasonable target is for the downside here during the bear market. I see a lot of people saying the bear market will be the worst ever and we'll make it all the way down to 10k, okay? But to my mind, that just shows a lack of understanding for mining. Miners will defend the network significantly long before we get to 10k, okay? I think it's much more reasonable based on the profile of how much it costs to mine a Bitcoin and all this kind of thing, that we're going to see price stop somewhere between, I would say, about 70, 75k and perhaps even higher than that. I think anyone calling for sub 70k is just not really understanding of how mining works and what the miners will do to protect the network at those kind of levels. I know there's always a bunch of people that will come in here and say, well, you don't understand the difficulty adjustment. I do. I completely understand the difficulty adjustment, but that's not really how it works. Just because we can adjust the difficulty down does not change the fact that miners run on very thin margins, electricity is fixed, and even the cheapest miners on the entire earth currently require at least 35, 40k. And even then, they're going to be struggling. And the vast majority, and I do mean vast majority of miners require 70, 75k, right? Many of the more standard miners, the less efficient ones, they require around 90 to 100k to be breaking even at the moment. So the idea that, you know, oh, I've got a technical target that says 10k. No, okay, you just don't get it. You don't get it at all. And so based on my current understanding and knowledge of the mining network, I think 75k is a pretty reasonable downside bear market target. And if that's true, to get an 80% drawdown means we've got to see a top of around 370, 380k. Again, I don't think enough people are adjusting for the fact that we've actually got to go quite a lot higher here to make this make sense from a 4-year cycle and a bear market perspective. Now, I know there's going to be somebody that says, Camel, the vol is decreasing each time. Yeah, you are right, okay, because we went from about 87% to 84 to 70-ish percent, 77, let's say. And so is it reasonable that this bear market is less again? Yeah, it could well be, right? It absolutely could well be. If it's 70%, then from, again, that 380k target, that would put us somewhere around 113k for the low. Or we could move this thing down back to what I believe to be a reasonable decline, a bear market low of around 75k. And that still gives us a top of around $250,000. We've still got to come all the way up to $250,000 just to make a 70% bear market seem feasible, seem like it can work. And if you go back and study the relationship of the bear market lows to the minor floor prices, what you'll find is each time, if the minor floor price is here, the bear market low sweeps it by a few K, okay, stays there for a bit and then comes back up. And then we go. And that's how we find the bottom. That's typically what tends to happen, right? In here, it was like the most efficient miners are struggling ever so slightly higher. And we just so happen to spend a little bit of time trading below, squeeze it, cause the minor capitulation, and off we go. It was the same here, right? The minor floor price at the time was somewhere in this neighborhood, and we just managed to puke below it, cause a bit of minor capitulation, hand a bit of hash rate over to the most efficient miners, and then the whole thing can restart again. So if 75k is that kind of minor floor price, is it reasonable to see 70k for a short period of time just to cause that squeeze, the minor capitulation that we see every cycle? Yeah, I think it is. I think it's totally reasonable. But if that's true, to get a 70% drawdown to around 70k means there's a lot higher to go. So the way I'm looking at all of this is we've got a list of things that seems to be, at least to my mind, setting us up for a very big upside push here. In no particular order, we've definitely got the narrative, okay? The narrative boxes can be checked. If the US president is about to approve a strategic reserve, add Bitcoin to a sovereign wealth fund, or a combination of both, I think that's enough to signal to the world, yes, time to go and ape into Bitcoin. Number two, we are late enough in the major 4-year cycle to say that we've now reached Berserko mode. And all prior instances, as I showed you, tend to have these 3 increasing angles of steepness. We are now at that point where we should expect the third angle to come in. It doesn't necessarily have to be as steep as I've got it here, but it should be steeper than the prior two, which means the gains to be made here should be more than we've seen for the entire rest of the cycle. Number 3, with a little bit of knowledge of minor floor prices, minor capitulation, how that tends to work in relationship to the bear market lows, then it tells us again, we've got to go quite high up here just to make the kind of bear market that we're used to seeing for Bitcoin feasible. Even if we use a 60% decline back to that minor floor price level and minor capitulation level, then we're still going to need to see almost 200k to make a 60% bear market fit the profile here. So unless this time is about to be massively different, unless what we've just done is found a weekly cycle low that's about to just kind of sideways chop around and then roll over and die, unless it's going to be the first cycle where we pull this thing back and then have some kind of very lackluster bear market decline, something like this, long and drawn out, hardly any downside volatility, it would mean we're already nearly at the bear market lows from a minor profile type idea. Even a 50% drawdown would barely take us back below the 49k weekly cycle low, right? It just, none of this to me makes sense. That doesn't really add up. I think we still have to move a lot higher before we can find some major tops and start to talk about bear market declines. So let me know what you think, right? Do you think that this is just pure hopium? Or do you think what I presented today is reasonably logical, at least based on the macro Bitcoin cycle? That's what I think personally. Time will tell as always. In the meantime, we have got a softening Dixie on its way to a weekly cycle low. I don't think this was the weekly cycle low as I was saying in the prior couple of videos. It just doesn't make sense that we would fail a weekly cycle on day 3. The metals seem to be doing metal things, so happy days there, no real changes. The stock market was clinging on as of yesterday, right? Notice how, again, we are still pushed up against the limit of what is technically acceptable from a weekly cycle low perspective. So far, no true weekly cycle low close failure just yet. Although on a wick basis, we have failed the daily cycle. With that said, we are right in the timing window now, as denoted by this future expected timing window on the indicator to tell us that we should expect a turn. All we have to do here is form some kind of swing and a reversal, get a breakout, and you can see we've got a long queued. It will be right inside the perfect expected future cycle low range from the indicator. The indicator will pick us a low, and it should be time to move higher from here. So it's extremely close to being a failed weekly cycle here. But again, the daily cycle is due to bottom. We are in the timing window now. And so on a balance of probabilities, I say we get at least some relief here in the coming days. And of course for Bitcoin, So far, okay, so good. We've got a weekly cycle low and a daily cycle low in. It's been back tested. We're back inside this squeezing formation. We've recovered the trend line, which, as we know, it's common to get fake breakdowns and bear traps into daily and weekly cycle low. The only thing that's really missing here is a big upside breakout, perhaps catalyzed by Friday's meeting, all of that narrative we've been talking about today. And then it may well be on like Donkey Kong, right? It may well be that we're at least in the third, if not a fourth angle incoming. On the monthly time frame, logarithmic scale, we can struggle to fit two, maybe a third one about to come in, angles, right? But on the regular scale, we've had 1, 2, and 3 now, okay? So does that mean, similarly to what we saw with MicroStrategy, we're about to get that fourth and final blow off top angle? Are we looking at something like this in the coming days and weeks? It seems crazy, and people always call you nuts because the sentiment has been destroyed into a weekly cycle low. But until such time as the market shows us something different, this is one possible outcome. I say for now we remain cautiously optimistic, continue to take this thing one day at a time. The Camel cycle low indicator picked this low as well, okay? So that gives me increased confidence. And you can see it's lining up a future expected window out here in line with my count as well. So I say for now, happy days, right? Until this thing rolls over and dies, then we're long, we're strong, and we will see what the market can give. I'm your boy Camel. I hope you're doing well in life. Until next time, take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.
Camel Finance, he's the man to see. Rocking the markets with his contrarian spree. Trades like a pro, no fear, no shame. Sticking to his guns in his money game. He's a badass, oh yes indeed. Camel Finance got the markets key. Taking us normies on a bump.